Welcome to Discover E's Persist series, where we create conversation to help women persevere and thrive in engineering and tech careers. On today's episode, we'll hear from 4 women who are pushing new boundaries for inclusivity in STEM. Do you feel like you can bring your authentic self to work? Have you ever felt pressured to defy a stereotype? And when you look to the future for women of color in STEM, what progress do you see so far, and where are their critical needs still? We'll dig into these questions and more. Let's go. I'm thrilled to introduce you to today's speaker, Tiana Conley. As Vice President of Global Cereal for the Kellogg Company, Tiana is responsible for the $6 billion flagship portfolio with fan-favorite brands, including Special K, Frosted Flakes, and Froot Loops. With degrees in chemical engineering and business administration, Tiana has held a variety of marketing roles at Beam Suntory, Kimberly-Clark, as well as Procter & Gamble. When it comes to shaping more inclusive workspaces in STEM, Tiana is all about sweeping the dirt from underneath the rug and staying true to yourself. Let's hear her story.
I'm Tiana Conley, Vice President of Global Cereal at the Kellogg Company. I am from Chicago. I grew up to 2 awesome parents. My mom is an immigrant from the Philippines. My dad's from Indiana. And that was an important part of my story growing up in a blended family of mixed cultural background. You know, my mom came to this country from a very humble beginning. She did not speak hardly any English when she arrived here. So it was really something to witness seeing her strong growth and development as a woman, but also a lot of slights that she experienced as an immigrant. And eventually she did become a U.S. citizen, but to observe all of the challenges that she had to go through and face shaped who she was. And I think witnessing that as a young child, I think informed, my view on the world. Similarly, my dad is a Black man. He grew up as an only child, raised by a single mom, and he had many challenges of his own, losing his mother fairly early on in life, and how that shaped him and how that impacted him and how that inspired him to really be a leader, how to be a really independent person, how to provide for his family, and the kind of person that he wanted to shape his family to be. As far as what kind of student was I and how did I get involved in STEM, being someone who eventually became an engineer, I did not set out to be an engineer. I'm not sure I knew what an engineer was, but I was always someone that was very inclined in math and science. As a young child, I think my parents just encouraged me. I was always a really great student, and they never pushed me toward or against one subject. I never had any of this nonsense about math or sciences for boys and, language arts are for girls. They were just like, great. If you're good at math, be great at math. If you're great at science, be great at science. And so I didn't grow up with these ridiculous stereotypes about what women could do or not do, or, what people of color could do, what Black people could do, what Asian people could do. My parents were just like, if you're awesome at that, be awesome at that. And I think that was really important to shaping my self-identity as a young person, because I never had those limitations placed on me at home. My parents always believed in me and encouraged me at whatever interests I had. And frankly, my interests were broad. I mean, I remember being a young person and thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up? Okay, well, I want to be a doctor, but I also want to be like an ice skater. Never mind that I had like 0 talent in ice skating. It's just that, my parents were like, whatever you want to be, we support you in that goal. And I think that was really important to shaping my self-esteem. But I had one Black teacher in my college studies program where I went to high school, and he was my chemistry and advanced chemistry teacher, and his name was Mr. Gustav. And he had said to me, you're really great at science. You're really great at math. You should be a chemical engineer. I really respected him. He was really smart. Reflecting back, I'm like, he's probably too smart to be a high school teacher. Often think about what his story was and how he ended up where he was. Back in the day, there were these things called Consumer Reports, which for the young people, they're like, what's that? But there were these books. You could go look up your major and top schools. And I looked up the major for chemical engineering and I was like, top salary. That's the one, cha-ching. So I immediately went to what are the top schools for chemical engineering? And that's where I applied. So it was like University of Illinois, Purdue, and Georgia Tech. And those were the schools that I visited for college, and ultimately ended up going to the state school in Illinois because that was where I got the most financial aid and scholarships, and eventually ended up basically going more or less with a full ride. So that is how I ended up being a chemical engineer. And eventually I did figure out what chemical engineering was. I did like it a lot. I do love science. I remember the final of one of my tests was like, calculate the number of molecules of air in this room. And I'm like, what? I will never forget that. I love math and science still. I was very close to being a math minor, but didn't follow through on that. Sometimes I wish I did still. But I learned how to be a chemical engineer, not only from my coursework, but also from doing internships. And I had the opportunity to do 3 fantastic internships when I was an undergrad. The great thing about University of Illinois is that it's a top recruited school for companies. And so there were always fantastic job fairs, career fairs. And so that was just something you did. The first summer, I got recruited to Abbott Laboratories, a pharmaceutical company, and I got to work as, frankly, a mechanical engineer that summer on the launch of a new drug, Prevacid, that summer, and doing a manual for line installation to make sure it was safe for employees. The second summer, I worked at General Mills in Minneapolis, so competitor to Kellogg. And I worked on Betty Crocker frosting, and I did a cost savings for them. And that was like super cool because I was basically like a food scientist and worked in like a pilot plant and like scaling up formulas. And I did learn how to properly frost a cake, which is a skill that comes in handy as a mom even now. And then my last internship was working at Procter & Gamble. That's where I eventually went to work. And the nature of the work that I did there was quite different. It was something called products research. And that was like a blend between scientific skills and really like consumer insights. So it's more like scientific consumer insights is what I would call it. And I learned all different kinds of things like consumer research techniques. I learned how to moderate qualitative research and learn how to do quantitative research. But I also did things like support demos. And this is kind of what was my foray into marketing. But I had to do things like support the demos that went on advertising. And demos are things like when you watch a Tide commercial, which I did work on Tide, the ad will sometimes be like, this sock's whiter than that sock. So because there's this thing called truth in advertising, which you might not, when you watch political ads, are not held to the same standards, I think, as consumer products. But consumer products are held to a very high standard. When you see these socks and you're saying this one's washed by Tide and this one's washed by the competitor and the one washed by Tide is whiter, you have to supervise that to make sure that they're, being shown in a way that's honest and consistent with the way the product's used. And so I got to go to advertising shoots and see how that was done. And then I had to write like claim support documents and things for the networks to do clearance for the advertising and things like that. But I got to see the other side and work with marketers. And I'm like, I think kind of want to do that. And that's really kind of what sparked my interest in marketing. But that was my journey up until that point as an engineer. So I think one of the things that has enabled me to get to where I am is I don't give a crap what people think. I honestly don't care. And that is one of the things that has allowed me to break barriers is I don't see barriers. I just do myself. That's really beneficial because it allows me to get to where I want to go. It's really bad in the sense that it's super off-putting to people because it's disruptive and it shakes hierarchy and it breaks people's stereotypes and belief systems. And so in really conservative organizations, which is every place I've worked, that can create enemies. It can be political fire. It can create a lot of problems. But really, when you're striving to create change, and in the back half of my career, creating change for others and breaking systems, it's really, really important. So I don't care. And I think it's really kind of that attitude, I feel like, well, where does it come from? I think part of it is just in my DNA. Like, I think it's the set of genes that I inherited from my parents. And then it's been reinforced maybe as a learned behavior, that's just how I move throughout life. And it's served me well and has enabled me to have good outcomes. So maybe it's a combination of nature and nurture. Another thing about me is that I'm also a very curious person. I think your curiosity fades with age a little bit. Like if you observe children and the types of questions they ask, and then you observe adults and how they move throughout the world, it's very different, right? And you don't even have to have children to appreciate that. It's just that children are very curious. And so I think I'm naturally curious, but even more so earlier in my career. And so I think when I arrived in corporate America, I was like a freaking sponge. It's great in an organization like Procter & Gamble because all they want to do is teach you. I did get my MBA eventually, but I really say I got my MBA from Procter & Gamble because that's really where I learned how to be a marketer. But honestly, that's also where I learned how to be a leader. What that organization does fantastically well, like their philosophy is promote from within. So they don't go hire, maybe more so now, but like at least traditionally, they don't go hire like super experienced, 20 plus year, 15 plus year, or 30 year veterans in the industry. They go hire people off the street. So I was like 21 years old when I got there, and then they train them up and bring them through the ranks. And so I think it was a really phenomenal place to start your career because number one, they offered really world-class training and development of people. They don't just teach you skill sets, which is extraordinarily valuable in and of itself, but they teach you leadership. In a lot of places, you either show up and you either have leadership or you don't have leadership, but they're not selling or teaching leadership. Okay. You get lucky and you either land with leaders who are great leaders or they aren't great leaders. At Procter & Gamble, they create and build leaders, and that includes you. Whether you have leadership or responsibility for people or not, they train you on how to be a leader. And I think that goes for their entire workforce. If they don't invest in their young people, they won't have future leaders in that company. So it was like an ingrained and embedded mindset. John Pepper was there first, and A.G. Lafley, but John Pepper had come and done a talk for the new hires, and it was like a fireside chat, literally is what they called it. And he literally sat in a room, and all the new hires sat on the floor, literally with like legs cross style, like little kindergartners, and just soaked up everything that he had to teach and say, and literally like had their notebooks out and were scribbling, furiously taking notes, of like writing down everything that he said. But all the leaders did that. And it was such an incredible, wonderful environment to learn. It was on every level. It was with your peers. It was with, so you were given a peer mentor, or you made a peer mentor, or they adopted you as a peer mentor. It was at, the next level of leadership. You'd have your boss, but then you'd also maybe have like a coach at your boss's level. And then you'd have a more senior level mentor or advisor or coach. And you could go seek people out. They'd seek you out, and so on and so forth. In a lot of rooms that I'm in, I'm the only person that looks like me, or in a Zoom call, I'm the only person that looks like me on the screen. But it's not like just like that started happening today. Like that's been through my entire life. Like when I went to private school as a kid, I was the only Black kid or Black and Asian kid in my class until my sister got old enough to go to that school. And then she went to that school. And so, it's not really a foreign experience, I think, as a person that, has the identities that we have, to find ourselves as the first or the onlys in rooms that we sit in, at tables we are at, and so on and so forth. And so I think what that can kind of create is this feeling like I have to go alone, or I have to be strong enough to do everything by myself. Because frankly, you do a lot of times. You actually just do, because there is literally no one else. And I think that over time, that creates a mindset that feeds into a lot of tropes that are good and bad. Like when I think of hashtag Black Girl Magic, or when I think of, strong Black woman, I'm really proud of that, but I'm also really sad about it, because it feeds into stereotypes that you always have to be strong, but it also, I think, works against your humanity, because people don't see you as human, or they don't see you as ever needing help or support. And then they expect you to do Herculean things when you're under-resourced or you're not supported consistently over time, which I think is very sad. And so I think that what advice I would give people is kind of the advice that I give myself now, but also in retrospect, but I think it still applies today, which is what I learned from, work in activism, what I see young activists doing today, but also activists of, the era before, is to be in community, and you have to actively work hard to seek out what that community is. I think social media makes it easier to do, but, sometimes that community is in your company and sometimes it's outside of your company. But I think there's a lot of organizations where you can build that, and it's how are you going to build your cohort? Sometimes your cohort looks like you. Sometimes your cohort is people who align with your value systems. Sometimes it's just someone who might be white, but they're an ally and they understand and get it and, can build those alliances with me. So I think is really thinking creatively. No matter what, you have to find those alliances inside, because you're not going to survive if you don't. I think you have to seek it out, at your level above, so that you're supported. And then you have to seek it outside more broadly within your network. Sometimes I feel like I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. I mean, I kind of feel like we're all constantly on a journey of becoming. I think that for young people, but frankly for old people, is exposure. Exposure can mean many things. It can mean trying things. It can mean going places. It can mean seeing people. I think representation is an important part of the equation, right? If I hadn't had that teacher, no other teacher bothered to say anything to me about anything. It was him. I don't know if that would have been different if I had had Black teachers in all of my other classes, but I only had the one Black teacher, and the one Black teacher is the one that said something to me. I mean, I think we're constantly evolving and refining and becoming who we are. And, sometimes that means that we become more expert in our given field. I know people that are engineers and stay engineers, and then they become more specialized and they become the boss of their field. And it's we need those people, because who else is going to, cure cancer, and who else is going to come up with the patents and the innovations and the breakthroughs. Sometimes you discover that you have cross-fertilization of interests, and there's also value in that as well, because, then there's people that are more generalists like myself that have, a broad set of skills and interests. So I think there's value in all of that. But at the end of the day, I think that it really comes down to what motivates you, what makes you tick as a person. And I think that the only way that you can discover what works for you is to try stuff and do it and be did you like that? And did you not like that? There's so many things I've done in my life where I'm the only thing I learned from that experience is that I hate that. I learned I hate that and I never want to do that again. But I don't regret those experiences, because I got value out of learning that I don't like that thing. I went to actuary camp one year in college, and I'm why did I do that? But like, I learned I didn't want to be an actuary. You know what I mean? And like, no shade to actuaries. Like, we need actuaries out there, but I learned I didn't personally want to be an actuary. There is value in that. Sometimes there's more value in understanding what you don't want to do than learning what you do want to do in life. And if you've ever seen a shelf with efficient assortment, you get that. Like, I don't know if you've ever gone shopping and you felt like there's too many things on the shelf to decide what you want. And sometimes when there's fewer things on the shelf, you can actually make a better selection. So I kind of view it like that when I move through my life. Like, sometimes screening things out makes it easy to filter what you actually want. I understand why women and people and Black people and brown people feel like they can't bring their authentic selves to work. I understand that. Really, really, really early on in my career, I struggled with that. Showing up at work as one person, and that's different than the person who you really are. And I tried that the first couple years of my career, where I was like one person at work and a different person at home. That was really exhausting for me. Like, I literally just felt so tired. I just decided one day that I was like going to be myself all the time. And I felt like maybe I'll get fired, but let's just see. And I just decided I was going to let it down. Like, it started with like, what kind of music do I listen to in real life? And what kind of music do I let people think I listen to at work? So at the time, now I'm telling my age, right? But like, I would be like rolling into work in the parking lot and I would be like listening to DMX. And like, I would have it on so loud and I would be like driving into work. And then like, before I like got to like the gate though, I'd be like turning it down and like trying to put on like something like more mainstream or like, you know, classical music or something. Like, that's like what I don't know, whatever I thought like people that would be okay for me to listen to at work, or like turn it really low. But then like when I got off work, then I would like go and listen to that. And then I, like, the minute I got past the gate, I would crank DMX back up, you know? And I'm like, what is that? What is that? You know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff, but then it's all the other types of things too, right? It's like how you talk, it's how you dress, it's, you know, the phrases that you use, the way you show up, how you represent your family, how you represent yourself. And I just decided, I'm like, you know, I'm just going to try to be myself. And then I just kind of did this thing in my head and I'm like, the worst case scenario is that I'll just get fired. And I thought about it and I'm like, if they fired me for being myself, then I probably don't want to work there. Something like shocking happened. The more that I started to behave like myself, first of all, the less tired I was, but the more people started to respond to me and my authentic self. And I got more positive feedback around like my performance and my behavior. Now, like there's always haters. Okay. So I'm not going to say people are like, I've had haters all the way through. Do you know what I'm saying? But like in general, people were having more authentic connections with me and it just got stronger. And so I just started like leaning in more and more and more and more. And I had this like thought in my head that, I realized that I really suck at being people that aren't me. I realized that everybody doesn't like it, that I'm not for everybody, that I'm polarizing. You know, some people will be listening to this and be like, I don't like that. I've been tone policed. I've been targeted in organizations. I've had people have negative responses to it. Some people just don't like me. I'm not for everybody, but I'm like super okay with that. Like, I'm a marketer. And one thing I understand about marketing is that for marketing, you have to be targeting to a certain audience. And if you're like targeting to everybody, then nobody, like, you're like kind of like nothing to no one. And so for me, I'm kind of like, I'm not for everybody. And I understand that, like, I'm a very specific flavor. I'm not vanilla. But anyway, that has career implications. That means that some opportunities haven't been given to me. That means I don't always get the promotion. That means I don't always get the pay. That means I don't always get the opportunity. And so getting back to other people and why they're afraid to be themselves is because they know that too. Every person has to assess for themselves, am I willing to take that risk? Am I willing to not have something at the expense of? And every person has to do that equation in their own head and decide, what am I giving up for what I'm getting? And for me, I did the equation and I decided that I am worth it every time. And whatever I'm losing, I didn't want that. I have to be like what I want to see. And so it's really important to me that for like future generations that I set an example of what it means to be yourself. Even if you're not like me, just to understand that it's okay to be yourself. I think if we push STEM in like certain countries that we label as developing, and we had the same agenda to drive STEM in those countries as we did in other countries, I have a hard time believing we wouldn't come up with the same number or similar number or maybe even more scientists out of those countries as in other countries, or proportionally. Where is the will? Where is the agenda? Where is the investment? And I would expand this more broadly to systemic inequality, because it's the same answer, which is the rhetoric is there. I'm not sure if the true desire is, because if it was, I think it would be different. I think that the possibility is all there. I think what's missing is the access and the opportunity. But certainly when people have the access and they have the opportunity, we have the outcome.
I love Tiana's take on how we need to be what we want to see. What has allowed you to stay true to yourself in your work? When you dream of tomorrow, what is it that you want to be and see for women of color in STEM? We'll start our live Q&A session with these questions. Please share your story and responses with us in the chat box. We look forward to hearing from you. See you soon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live discussion. I am Mariah Dixon. I'm an engineer in the Fire Protection Department at UL LLC, also known as Underwriters Laboratories, and I will be your moderator for the live portion of this event. I would like to take this time to allow our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. First up, please welcome Ms. Tiana Conley.
Hello, everyone. I think you just met me, but I'm Tiana Conley, Vice President of Global Serial at Kellogg Company.
Hello, everyone. I am Angelita Daniel, and I work in the College of Engineering at NC State. I serve as Special Advisor to our Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiatives. So I got to give a shout out to Dr. Louis Martin Vega, and I also serve as Director of our Minority Engineering Program. So I'm excited to be on the call and to have this conversation.
Lakeithia, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so Lakeithia Williams, I am an engineering program manager at Peloton Interactive, and I am excited to be here and share with you all the golden nuggets that I have.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies, for joining us and participating in our Q&A portion of this event. If anyone in the audience has any questions they would like to ask, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A chat box. All right, so let's get started with the question that was posed at the end of the video. What has allowed you to stay true to yourself in your work? When you dream of tomorrow, what is it that you want to see and be for women of color in STEM? So who would like to go first?
I'll go first. I will say what has allowed me to stay true is that I have always focused on doing what is right, in terms of how people show up in spaces, honoring them for who they are. Um, I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh, material science and engineering, and the program that supported me on my journey, the director was a big part of me being where I am today. And so I show up as my authentic self in his legacy. And so I've been able to remain true because I've used that as the guiding path for me. When I think of tomorrow, what I would like to see for women of color in STEM is that we can show up and be authentic, that we don't have to have these roles that we're, one way when we're at work and a different way when we're at home, to be able to just show up and just be. That's what I would like to see for our tomorrow.
For me, when I think about what has allowed me to be my true self at work, I would say it's two parts. One, I grew up in an environment where I could try anything, do anything. And so I never had this desire to please anyone or be a part of trends because I could seek out what I wanted for myself. So that has guided me. It has been my guiding light, I should say, since a little kid. So that's the first piece. The second piece is I just naturally like who I am. And so I think that plays a huge part into it. Like having confidence in who you are, what you look like, what you represent will help you in the future. It helps me in my future. So loving yourself is a huge piece of that. What I want to see for women of color would be not even have to ask these questions about women of color. What do you want? Where do you see yourself? Like, let's just X that out and do what makes you happy. Go for what you want, and just leave everything else alone. Just focus on yourself, focus on who you are, and let's leave these questions about colonizing women of color as one entity.
Yeah, and you guys heard a ton from me, but I think that what allows me to be true to myself is that I have a really strong internal compass. And I'm really, if you've ever run, it's an individual race, right? It's a head game. There's no reason why you should be able to run a marathon, but you can. I've done a half, but it's a mental game. It's not a physical game. And so I think that's the same true and mindset that's aligned with what allows me to be true to myself is, really staying focused and running my own race and not really worrying what other people are doing. My wish for, women of color in STEM, Black women, frankly, on a larger basis, no matter what field you're in, is just that we show up and we take space. And, I think that we're having a moment, and I'd like to make that a movement.
Absolutely. I like that. We show up and take space. I'm using that.
I'm going to do snaps to that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I'm like, for me, it's a simple fact that I can't be effective when I'm at work if I can't be myself. You shine through your work. So I have to be myself. That's the only way that I can, get done with whatever I need to get done. And the thing that I would like to see more is just, more people that look like me making these landmark inventions and leading others to making life better. That's just what I want to see.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next thing we have are some questions posed by the audience. So one is a group selected question that was predetermined. So according to Psychology Today, people who struggle with imposter syndrome believe that they are undeserving of their achievements and the high esteem in which they are in fact generally held. They feel that they aren't as competent or intelligent as others may think, and that soon enough, people will discover the truth about them. Those with imposter syndrome are often well accomplished. They may hold high office or have numerous academic degrees. Knowing this is more prevalent among women of color, what can be done to combat this mindset?
I have so much to say about this, and because it's so common in conversations I have with people that I mentor, people that mentor me. you know, my peers, people in my family, and so on and so forth. And I guess the first thing I'd say is I wish that I could take that away for people, because the truth is that to be where you are, you have to be better than everybody else. So it's almost like a completely ridiculous concept of imposter syndrome, because if you got there, you had to be more than qualified. Like, there's regular qualified, and then there's the qualified you have to be as a Black woman, which is like more qualified than everybody else. So it's crazy that we would get to where we are and feel like we don't deserve to be there, because we more than deserve to be there. If you weren't meant to be there, they wouldn't allow you to be there.
Absolutely.
Okay. And that's what I want to tell people about imposter syndrome. I understand why people face it, because everything in your life, from the minute you're born, when your mom's pregnant with you, tells you that you're worth less, that you don't deserve to be there, that you shouldn't take up space. But the truth is, to be where you are, and you know, I hope everyone listening to the sound of my voice believes this, is that if you weren't meant to be there, you wouldn't be. So lean in.
Yeah, this takes me back to a Michelle Obama quote that I actually love. And I don't know the exact quote, I should have got it, but Google it afterwards. And I believe she was doing her book tour and she was getting interviewed. And one of her inserts was like, you know, you are around smart people all the time. How has that made you feel? How has it made you become an imposter syndrome? And she basically said, they're not as smart. I sit at these tables and I'm thinking that they're qualified as me, and they're not. And so for me, I feel I identify with that. I feel the same way. I was a chief of staff to a senior vice president of engineering about a couple years ago. And so I was able to sit at these tables where the people who make the decisions for the company are at these tables, you know, and I'm going in there thinking they're out of this world and they're average. And I'm not saying that they're not smart, they're smart, but the things that we're talking about, the processes that we're going through, I know smart people who look like me who could do this job. And so that's where I kind of realized at that point that imposter syndrome, it's just fear. It's fear that I allocate in my mind, it takes up space, and it doesn't belong there. You know, if I've worked hard, I deserve the spot. And so that's how I get out of this imposter syndrome mode for myself and just full force ahead.
And I'll say that the collegiate space and interacting with students on a daily basis, that is like the biggest hurdle that I have to get them over. And of course I dealt with it as well, but them understanding that we wouldn't have admitted you to NC State, the College of Engineering, if you didn't have the ability to do what needs to be done in terms of, you know, graduating with the engineering or computer science degree. And so I would say that my job is to be the cheerleader for them, to help them understand that you should be here. You have everything you need to be here and to do well. And so I will tell you, as you go through your different career changes, when you show up in new spaces, you do sit back and go, should I be here? And you have to be quick to say, yeah, I should be here. I have to be here, especially if I'm the first one. Being the first is always difficult, but if you're the first to like lead the path and, you know, be in a space that you don't typically see Black women, yeah, you should be there. And it may be uncomfortable at first, but you didn't get there by chance, right? You're supposed to be there, and there's a purpose for you being there, and it's to open the doors for others to come behind you as well.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so next question. So Tiana touched on a few systemic factors that hinder women of color from pursuing a career in engineering, such as biculturalism, which is the idea that we are expected to behave differently at work and at home. There are a few other factors, including, but not limited to, a lack of role models or feelings of not belonging. What do you believe is the required mindset for African American women to have when completing her degree and or working in engineering field in order to be successful?
I will just jump in since everybody is holding it. I will say that again, the mindset that you can do it, And yeah, there are times where you want to, give up and do something else. I know, growing up, I was great in math and science and always had support, from my family in terms of my academics. But I got to a point where I was just like, I really don't understand, or you just have to know your worth, right? You have to know what you're doing, where you're going, and sometimes that feels uncomfortable, but you can really focus on what you're trying to do and block out the people that are telling you that you can't do things. And so I actually blanked on a minute on what the question was. What is the mindset that you need to have? The mindset is that you can do it, right? That you can be there and do the things, and there are going to be times where it's challenging. You got to use resources, and you have to have people that are like proof of where you're going. And so you will hear our dean for distance proof in terms of role models. And so making sure that you connect to those people. So that's how I would answer that question. And excuse me for blanking for a minute, but we have a lot of questions coming.
Anybody else?
There are other like real disparities. I mean, like I was a great student in school. I had like a 4.0, I think my junior year, maybe my senior year too. So I'm blanking a little bit. But when I got to college and I showed up in my classes, my first math class, I didn't know what an integral sign was. And I was in class with kids who were already like, oh, I'm a sophomore by credits because I took all these AP classes in high school. And that was not my life. That was not my reality. And so I think sometimes there are real practical barriers. And by the way, they don't just show up in school, they show up in your profession. It's like you show up in the room as a candidate for the same promotion as another person. They like have been like golfing and had lunch with all the people who are on the committee to vote for the promotion. And that is consistent, and that's thematic, and the barriers are real. I think what has helped me is get on game with people who know the game. And get schooled. I think mentorship is really key for that. I was mentoring someone the other day, and they're, aspiring in their field. And I'm like, hey, let me tell you about what salaries look like. Let me explain to you what golden handcuffs are and what that really means, and what pay ranges look like at every level through the organization, what you should be targeting internally, and as you vet yourself through the market. So I think really connecting yourself with people that know the game and get on game. I'm still trying to get on game. One of the aspirations I have in the future is to sit on a paid board. I sit on some nonprofit boards, but I'd like to be on a paid board. You know what? There's a game. So I think you've got to figure out if the things aren't, naturally coming to you. You have to be aware enough to realize there's some things that other people know that I don't know. They've got game, I don't have a game. I got to go figure that out, and I got to get the resources around me, or try to find my way to the resources that can help me figure that out.
Lakithia, were you going to add anything else? Because the only other thing that I wanted to add to that question is, especially in my space with students, is that the messaging that they receive. And so, you will have students that are topping their classes, graduating from high school. They'll get here and, they'll start to struggle, and they'll go talk to their professor or their advisor. And as soon as they talk to them, it's message that you should do something else. Right. And so again, it's my job to help them understand, like, no, don't take that message. Right. You may have to come back, and you may have to do tutoring, be involved with tutoring. You may have to, utilize resources to get what you need, but understanding that there are going to be a lot of people that message that you shouldn't be here and you're not capable of being here, and that you have to set yourself up and just block out, like you said, Tiana, block out the haters. Right, because there's always going to be people that are going to, question your presence and your ability. But as long as you know, hey, I'm here, I have the ability to be able to read a book. If it's in a book and I can read it, I can sit there. It might take me a little bit longer, but I can get it. So I always tell my students that you have everything that you need at your fingertips, but some of you may have to do a little bit more. Right, if you come out of a high school that had all of the calculus classes and the advanced, sciences, and then you get here for the student that didn't have it, You just got to fill in. There's a little bit more work that you're going to have to do to be up to speed.
Yeah, no, just super quick, you know, resources, being resourceful, like all of you said, is key. If you want to be an engineer, you can be an engineer. You don't have to be good at math and science. I was great at math and science, but you don't have to be good at math and science. That's a myth. You can be an engineer without being good at math and science. Also, closed mouths don't get fed. If you want to do this, if you want to be an engineer, then you need to make it happen. No one's going to give it to you at school. And guess what? It translates into professional life. No one's going to give me a promotion. I have to go after what I want. It just helps you become a better professional when you get into the engineering field.
Yes, closed mouths don't get fed.
I agree with everything. And I actually did come across one of my advisors telling me that I should not do engineering and that I should pursue something else. So I'm glad I didn't listen to him.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I'm glad you didn't, because you wouldn't be moderating our panel today. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
So the next question is, what advice do you have for allies? Any moments that stand out in your experience when an ally was positive or negative? Do's or don'ts?
This is
Or ally sponsors, or
It wasn't very specific, but I assume just
sponsors?
allies in general.
Okay.
Like-
Peers and bosses, probably. Okay.
Listen, ally is super hot topic right now, especially in this kind of racial awareness era that we're in. My biggest pet peeve is when people appoint themselves as an ally. That's not something you earn the right to. That's not something you have the right to do. If you're really an ally, you don't even want to carry the badge. You just doing the work. So I guess my hot take on it is ally is a verb, not a noun.
Mm.
That is.
And it's not a one-time thing, right? It's a progression, right, over the course of time, and like you can't just do one thing like Black Lives Matter. I love Black people, or I work with this Black person, and like you're an ally. No, you have to do the work. That means putting people in spaces that they're not in that room for, or nominating someone for a promotion when they actually deserve the promotion, right? It's actively helping others who don't look like you.
Right. And are you only an ally when things are, when we flash back to, the video with George Floyd and,
Right.
Breonna Taylor, everybody was woke, right? Everybody was woke and everybody wanted to support and figure out how do we fix this. And those of us that have been doing this, we've been saying this forever, right? And so for allies, and I do have to shout out my colleague, Dr. Laura Bottomley, who's the director of our Women in Engineering program. I appreciate her so much because we've been able to create a relationship that she's comfortable coming to me and asking things, right? So that she has what she needs to navigate the space as an ally. And so we've had conversations from, why is, Black woman's hair in terms of a perm versus, straightening her hair to a white person getting a perm and it being curly. What's up with, mac and cheese, who makes that at a cookout, right? So we have those conversations. And what is beautiful is to see her stand up in front of a group of Black girls and talk to them about the chemical process in terms of a perm, right? So I think the allies that are really in this space, they're comfortable being able to ask the questions that others are not comfortable to ask. And I think if you, create that space where people can ask questions, it's the way that we move and get to a better place in terms of the space where we want everybody to be included. So I just want allies to be consistent. Be consistent. Don't just show up when everything is bad and you see horrible things on TV.
Absolutely.
Let me also just clarify, please do not go up to a Black woman and be asking her these questions. Like, you need to establish that relationship with that person first. If somebody comes up to me, asks me, is my hair a weave? It's gonna be a problem. So I'm just gonna put that out there right now. Whether it is or isn't, it's none of your business. But I'm just keeping it real for a second. The other thing I would say is there is while you need to be comfortable to ask the questions, there is nothing comfortable about being an ally. If you're not putting your body at risk, if you're not putting yourself at risk, if you're not putting your money at risk, if you're not putting your political capital at risk, you are not an ally. Okay, you got to give some to get some.
Yeah. And Tiana, that's definitely true. I would say that you know, the relationship that Dr. Bonley and I have, it's one that we can ask those kind of questions, and she is one that stands in the gap, right? And so if there's a meeting and I'm not on it, she's the one that goes, well, why wasn't Angie on this, you know, meeting, right? And so those allies are so critical to the space that we're in.
Mhm.
All right, so the next question, what can someone, for example, a Black woman, do if their manager is actively trying to force them out by treating them poorly in open meetings?
Ooh.
Oh,
Why
Why did everyone just get triggered at the same time on that? I mean, I think the someone is all of us, and on a regular basis feel tested. I mean, my 2 cents on it is, I think you have to, people generally quit the manager, not the company.
absolutely.
Exactly.
I think you have to think through, can that relationship be improved or saved, or can it not be? Sometimes you can dig within and kind of assess that. Sometimes you need to go get help. Like, this is when those aspiring allies who want to be mentors and coaches to people of color can step up, you know, and help and get all that advice to really kind of assess your individual situation. But I would say that, you know, even me personally in a number of different jobs have faced that situation where people are trying, it's very clear they're trying to make you leave. And that is really something to deal with, right? And I think, you know, that's a consistent experience that you have over and over again. You start questioning the system.
Absolutely. For me, I would assess, is it the manager or is it the company? Am I not being, like, if I leave this group, will I be supported in another role, another group doing another role? If that's yes, then I would exit to the left, and I would find a mentor who I could talk to make those kind of connections on how to get out of that role, and professionally, right? You want to keep the professional relationship there, but move as fast as possible. I'm a firm believer. Don't stay anywhere you're not welcome, and don't stay anywhere you're not happy. It's not worth it. The money's not worth it. Your happiness, your health is so important. At the end of the day, you will find another job. That's not the issue. Should be your happiness. And then 2, if it's not, if you can't go to a different role in that company, then leave. And right now there's like a great exodus of people leaving their companies anyway. So I'm confident that you will find another job. I'm not telling you to quit, but find out an opportunity that fits you for where you are right now in your career and where you are right now in your life.
And I'll just echo that. I'm at NC State for that reason.
Yeah.
You have challenges and people are not supportive, and you know, you let people know and there's nothing done. You don't have to stay there. You go to where you're appreciated, right? Not tolerated. I always say, I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be appreciated.
I love that. I'm loving Nicole Hannah-Jones
Yes.
as well, but I mean, I refuse. No is a whole sentence.
Yes. Period. After that, no.
Period.
Yeah.
And in that case, you know, HBCUs, they won big on that one, right? For our friends up the road here. So no, but go where you're appreciated and not tolerated. That's so important. Life is too short.
Absolutely. You got this. Whoever you are, I'm sure you'll be successful.
This next question is from, I'm going to butcher it, I'm so sorry, Jessica Jambai. When that support for growth and mentorship is lacking in your work environment, what advice would you give to someone who is an introvert and doesn't know how to seek out what they need the most, a counselor or advisor?
I think
So,
you've got to dig deep.
yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna be really honest with you, I seem really outgoing and I seem like I've got a lot of stuff figured out. It's been a very long journey. I won't name how many years it's been, but to be honest with you, I was like really socially awkward when I first showed up in corporate America. And it was really difficult. Like I would try to reach out to people for like mentoring relationships and I would be like sweating, like nervous, shaking, like, oh my God, what am I going to say to this person? Please don't talk to me in the elevator. I don't know what I'm going to say. So, I mean, I think the thing is you have to work, you have to put in sweat equity. You got to work at it. You got to see other people who do it well. Try on some different styles. Like, oh, I like this person. This seems like this resonates with me. Try that. If that doesn't work for you, try something else. You just got to keep going. You got to keep grinding. You got to be willing to get uncomfortable. You've got to practice.
Yeah.
And it's not always a boss or someone who's in a higher position that can help you and mentor you. You utilize your peers. That may be a little bit easier for you because we may be at the same level or work in the same group, whatever. And take a note from them. How are they navigating through the organization? How are they doing how are they rising? And do you like some of the things that they're doing? It's not a science, it's just figuring it out yourself. Whatever matches to who you are, that's what you should do.
And growth is usually always uncomfortable. And so you're always going to have to stretch yourself and put yourself in spaces where, in order to get to that next level, there has to be that discomfort in terms of growth. So yeah, introverts, extroverts, so you just have to get out there and do it. And again, some people may seem like they're, great in front of people, but on the inside, they could be like, oh my God, I do not want to be here. I don't want anybody to talk to me, but they have worked to a point where they can get up and go out and be seen. So I would just say work to stretch yourself in terms of your comfort. And I think we have a minute left, right?
Oh, well, okay. So just the last question, or we might have a little bit more time. I was told to go ahead and keep going. So yeah, I'm like, so must be good. So this question is from Angela DeHart. What about students that do not have support from their parents or have fathers that actively undermine girls? It can be rough ride. Any thoughts or comments?
Oh, I'll take that one. And I don't know if my dad's on this call. Dad, if you're on this call, hopefully you'll still talk to me afterwards. So growing up, I started to share that I was great in math and science, and I was always like encouraged, and just my ability to do math and science was applauded. And so when I told my dad I wanted to do engineering, he was just like, girls don't do that. And it was the first time ever that he had like doubt in what I do. And so it was weird because he had never been that way before, right? And so when you think about, the things that you want to do and the people that are in your corner supporting you, to not have, parents that are, encouraging and pushing you, or even the flip side, I always tell my parents, you have to be mindful of how you message to students, where you say, I was horrible in math. It was the worst subject for me in college. You know what I mean? So you have to be very mindful. But for those that don't have the support, I would tell them that in the institutions like the NC State, find an office like mine that has a Miss Angie, right? That can walk you through and be that support. And if you need to go and, had to take a student to pick up a suit for a career fair, there are people that will stand in the gap, right? And then Miss Angie can introduce you to alumni who have walked the journey and the same path that you have, and I can begin to help them build that family of support. And so there are people, you just have to be open to interact with people and not afraid to share your story. I have to pull teeth to get my students to tell me what they actually have going on so that I'm able to support them in the best way possible. So share your story, and in that way you can get the help and the resources that you need.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
But yeah, that's a tough one when you come in not having support.
Okay.
Tiana, you didn't have anything to say?
I think it's such a hard situation. And I don't want to give people bad advice because I think some of that borders on your family situation, and there's probably some other dynamics that are potentially going on there. So, I mean, I would say seek resources. Seek out a trusted friend, seek out a trusted advisor, seek out someone who can give you some guidance. Look for resources. I mean, I do think a lot of times when we walk into spaces, it may not be someone a situation as direct as that, but we do find ourselves in spaces and in situations where we don't feel supported, we don't feel psychologically safe. We don't feel like we have sponsors or mentors or people we can turn to, and that's where I think you have to get really creative and build those relationships I was talking about in the video, and be like, where is my, who is my board of directors? Who are the people around me? Sometimes they're friends, sometimes they're people younger than you, sometimes they're people older than you, sometimes it's someone else in another marginalized community. And so I think you've got to get creative about how to create that support system for yourself. It's sad if you have to build that as a child alone. But as adults, certainly we get practice over and over again about how to build our cohorts.
Okay, well, that's all the time that we have for today. I want to thank these wonderful ladies, our panelists, for taking the time out. The insight and the knowledge you shared today here was welcomed, and I'm sure will be put to good use. Do you guys have any final pieces of advice?
Take up space.
And I will say that you have voice. Where you always hear people say, find your voice. You have your voice. I just need you to be confident and use it.
I would say two things. The first is failure is an event, not a person. You're going to continue to fail all throughout your life. Keep going. It doesn't matter. Pick up yourself and just keep doing what you need to do. And then for me, to you, I am rooting for everyone's rise on this call. So good luck.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'd also like to thank the audience for joining and engaging with everyone with your questions. Please be sure to tune into the next session, Diversifying Workforce Development, Opening Doors for Young Professionals, on October 13th. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great week.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Hit the motherfucker! Y'all looking for fame, I'm looking the streets. Y'all talk the talk, but I walk the walk. Small street, home of the brave, New York. Y'all make movies, but I make moves. I'm straight up, y'all got something to prove. But I swing, y'all not one, but I bring